The sound of running water echoed in the tiled walls of the diner's restroom, but it couldn't drown out the muffled sobs of a woman trying to hold herself together. Her trembling hands gripped the edge of the sink, her reflection staring back at her through tear-streaked eyes. Her name was Alyssa, and she'd been holding the weight of too many bad days under the mask of forced smiles and polite greetings. For the customers, she was the sweet waitress with the soft voice. But behind the counter, her manager saw her differently, as someone too quiet to fight back, too desperate to quit. That morning had begun like any other. The smell of coffee, the clatter of dishes, the hum of small-town chatter. But beneath that comforting rhythm, tension had been building. Alyssa's manager, Mark Ellison, a man with SL-licked hair and an inflated ego, had been snapping orders and throwing insults at every chance. He was the kind of man who mistook fear for respect. When Alyssa accidentally spilled a few drops of coffee on his expensive shirt, the entire diner froze. His expression hardened, his jaw clenched, and humiliation became his weapon. He barked at her to follow him straight into the staff bathroom. The other workers exchanged worried glances, but no one dared to move. Alyssa followed, her heart racing, the sound of his shoes clicking sharply against the tile. Inside, his anger exploded. He threw accusations, his voice rising until it filled the tiny room. He called her careless, stupid, worthless, and when she tried to apologize, his hand grabbed her collar, pinning her against the cold white wall. If you believe no one deserves to be treated this way, if you believe in kindness, courage, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Stories like this remind us what truly matters. Standing up for what's right, even when no one else does. Alyssa's breath caught as she tried to push his hand away. Fear clawed at her chest, but she refused to let the tears fall. All she could think of was her husband, Evan, who had been deployed for years as a Navy SEAL. He had taught her to stand tall, to never let cruelty define her worth. She had been working double shifts to keep their small apartment, waiting for the day he'd finally come home. What she didn't know was that he already had. Just an hour before, Evan had stepped into the diner quietly, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans. He wanted to surprise her, to see her face light up before she realized he was home for good. But as he waited near the counter, his excitement turned to confusion when he saw her manager grab her arm and pull her toward the back hallway. He could see the fear in her eyes, even from a distance. And then she disappeared behind the bathroom door. Inside, Mark's voice grew louder, his rage unchecked. "You think people come here to see you smile?" he sneered. "You're lucky I even let you work here." His hand tightened and Alyssa gasped, trying to find her voice, her strength. That's when the door creaked open. The sound was subtle, but in that moment, it felt thunderous. Mark turned sharply, and his words froze on his tongue. Standing at the doorway was Evan. Calm, silent, but his eyes, those sharp, stormy eyes, said everything. The SEAL inside him recognized the scene instantly. His wife pressed against the wall, the man's hand gripping her collar, the air thick with fear, and in that heartbeat of silence, something inside him broke. Mark stumbled back, trying to explain himself, but Evan didn't need words. He stepped forward with quiet, controlled fury, not shouting, not violent, but radiating a presence that made the room feel smaller. He took Alyssa's hand gently, pulling her behind him. "Are you all right?" he whispered. She nodded through her tears. Then Evan looked at Mark, his voice steady, calm, yet heavy with warning. "You'll never speak to her again. You'll never touch her again. Do you understand me?" For the first time, Mark had no power. His arrogance drained away, replaced by the reality of the men standing before him, a soldier who had stared down war itself. The security guard nearby had seen everything, and though he wore a uniform, he didn't move to stop Evan. He only stood there, silent, watching justice unfold in the most human way. When they walked out of that restroom, the diner was silent. Every customer had heard the commotion. Every worker had seen Mark's cruelty before, but no one had ever stood up to him. Until now, Alyssa, still shaken, walked beside her husband. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel powerless. She felt seen. Later that evening, sitting together in their small living room, Evan finally smiled. That same warm smile she had missed for so long. Alyssa leaned into him, whispering, "I thought I'd lost myself here." He kissed her forehead and said softly, "You never did. You just needed someone to remind you how strong you already are." The next day, news spread quickly through the town. The manager, who had humiliated his employees for years, was fired. The diner's owner publicly apologized to Alyssa and offered her a higher position, not out of pity, but respect. She didn't just survive what happened. She rose above it. Months later, Alyssa started her own small cafe. She called it Second Chance Diner, where she promised no one would ever feel small or scared behind the counter. People came not just for the food, but for the warmth. Every customer left with a smile because Alyssa knew what it felt like to have hers taken away, and she vowed never to let that happen to anyone else. If this story touched your heart, if you believe kindness is strength and standing up for others still matters in this world, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us bring more real emotional stories that remind us of the good still left in people. Before you go, comment below. What would you have done if you were in Alyssa's place? Because sometimes courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it's the quiet strength that says, "This ends today." And on that day, in that small diner bathroom, kindness and courage finally walked back in together.